Welcome back, everybody. So I wanted to share this week a couple of personal stories, but first I would like to say that tonight the session is sponsored in memory of Linda Firestone, Leah Bat Aaron, who passed away this past Yom Kippur, just a few days ago. She was the mother of a very, very close friend of mine, my university housemate, Michael Firestone. She dedicated her life to the good of the community. She brought up 3 strapping Scottish boys by herself after her husband passed away. And she was renowned for her kindness. And if any of you know any of her sons, you'll probably see that kindness coming through into the next generation. So may her memory be a blessing, and any learning or growth that comes from this session should be in her merit. Okay, so on to the stories. After I've been working for a short while, I've mentioned before that I'm an optometrist. After a while, when I was working in the practice that I was working, I remember a distinct occasion where this lady came in, and she was used to seeing one of the partners, one of the senior partners in this practice. She came in one time, and neither of the partners was available to see her at that particular moment. So the receptionist recommended that she sees me. Now, I still remember, I still remember as the receptionist pointed at me, I still remember her face. It was like this. She sort of looked me up and down, like sort of taking me in. I was younger. I didn't have a beard. I didn't have any gray. I looked quite young, and I could see what was going on in her mind. You know, who is this? Who is this child? Who's this child who they think can replace my super specialist? If you could put yourself on mute, thank you for joining. But if you could put yourself on mute, maybe I can do. There we go. I'll mute people. Who is it who's coming along and pretending to be an optometrist? Anyway, she eventually agreed, and I think I did a good job. I looked after her. I did whatever was needed, and at the end, she left without saying thank you. I was completely blown away by this. I can understand that she wanted to see a particular person. She left without saying thank you. There was no thank you or anything. I was shocked. Now, sometime after that, I had an experience in my own home when I was trying to explain to one of my young children that they need to say thank you to their mother when their mother gives them some food. So the young boy says, "Why should I say thank you? She has to look after me. It's her job." And then it twigged in my mind. It twigged in my mind. There are some people who never grow out of that stage. Now, thank God, thank God my son has grown out of that stage, and he now always says thank you when he receives something from his parents. But that is exactly the mindset we're talking about. We're talking about somebody who has it in their mind that I deserve this. I've paid for it. I deserve it. It's mine by rights. In fact, in her case, she wasn't even getting what she thought was her right, which was to see the senior partner. Some people never ever grow out of that. I don't know if any of you have read the really amazing book called The King of Schnorrers by Israel Zangwill. Very, very famous comedy. One of the funniest books I've read. He was an English Jewish Zionist who lived, I think, in the 19th century. He wrote this book about this schnorrer, this beggar, this Jewish beggar who was called Menachem Bueno Barzillai Azevedo da Costa, right? That's how he called himself, and he made out that he was like this sort of royalty. And the way he begged, the way he did all of his begging was essentially to convince people that their money was his by right. So there's one particular scene where he begs money from a particular person, and then he uses that money to buy the fish that the person themselves wanted to buy, right? The donor wanted to buy this fish, and he's just taken the money and has used the very money. There's another occasion where he basically buys a kibbud an honor in the synagogue for an exorbitant price. He outbids everybody. And then afterwards, he then goes around the different members of the community begging for money to pay for that particular honor that he paid. Now, the reality is, you may even know some schnorrers, some beggars who are like that nowadays. People who truly believe that your money is theirs by right. And what's fascinating is that this word rights, the concept of rights, is very, very prevalent in today's society, in today's Western society. Everybody's talking about, it's my right, this right, that right, I deserve it. But if you look at the Torah, the word rights basically doesn't appear. Instead, the Torah talks about our responsibility to look after the poor, our responsibility to look after those who are suffering. Not their rights, our responsibility towards them. And obviously, sometimes the government, if people aren't fulfilling their responsibilities, the government's going to have to stand in and make sure that people are being looked after. But the concept of this is mine by right is something that causes big problems. You know, a few weeks ago, we were talking about this Modeh Ani prayer that we say first thing in the morning, okay? We talked about the fact that it allows us to thank God for this gift of renewal, for the fact that I'm not bound by previous failures. Today's a new day. The first word of that particular blessing, prayer, whatever you want to call it, is modeh. Modeh means thanks. But also in Hebrew, it also means to admit. The same word, modeh, means thank you, thanks, and also admit. Why? Very simply, because in order to thank somebody, in order to be grateful, we need to admit that without the person giving us that thing, we wouldn't have received it. It wouldn't have been ours by right. So when we get up in the morning, what we're essentially saying when we say Modeh Ani, thank you, I'm thanking you, what we're saying is, this new day of my life is not mine by right. I didn't have to have it. I'm admitting that I do not necessarily deserve this new day. And yet you gave it to me. And therefore I'm thankful. How far does this go? There is a fascinating verse, a fascinating pasuk in the Torah in Devarim, or in Sefer Devarim, where it says, Lo teta'ev Mitzri, do not despise an Egyptian. Why? Why can't we despise an Egyptian? Do you know why? The verse tells us, Ki ger hayita ba'atzor, because you were a stranger in his land. He looked after you. You were there for 210 years. He gave you some food. He gave you some. 1 second. We were slaves there. Okay, fine. He gave us some food during famine. And yeah, I suppose when we were slaves, he looked after us because he had to give us some place to live. We were slaves. Surely we pay for it. But the verse is telling us, it doesn't matter that you paid for it. It doesn't matter that they mistreated you. There's something that you got from them that without them you wouldn't have got. For that small thing, irrespective of anything else that happened, for that small thing, we have to be grateful. At the very least, don't despise them. Wow, amazing. So these two concepts, I'm going to end here, these two concepts that we've been talking about over the last few weeks, the concept of cultivating an appreciation in what we have, not letting things get sort of regular so that we're not aware of what's happening. That's the first thing. And the second thing, being willing to admit that something is not ours by right. Those are the two concepts that will allow us to get real joy from the basic things that we have in our life. So here's the challenge for this week, just what we've been saying. You wake up in the morning, you're saying thank you. You're saying thank you, hopefully still, for a new day, for a renewal, for the opportunity of doing something new. But add on to that, you're now admitting, I didn't have to have this day. I didn't have to have it. It didn't have to happen. And that will help us to appreciate it more and quite possibly use it better. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope everybody will have a wonderful, wonderful Chag, a wonderful Sukkot. What I'm going to do is I'm starting, because people have been asking me, can I have reminders? So if you would like to receive a reminder, or if something changes and I need to inform people, I'm sending out to the chat there a form that you can fill in. It's all private. Nobody else sees it apart from me. You can fill in your email there and I will send out weekly reminders if you would like. So please sign up. Thank you everybody for joining.